Fantastic. Thank you very much. Fredson?
Here, I'm looking for my headphones, so sorry.
Not a problem. Sterner, have you joined us? Councilmember Sterner? Okay, so he'll probably join us in a little bit. Vento?
Here.
Wolf?
Here.
Zarin? And Lindstrom?
Here.
Great, so Councilmember Zarin will probably be joining us shortly. We'll hopefully catch up with them when we do our next roll.
Perfect. Thank you. That takes us to our agenda, where we have just two non-consent items on our agenda today. And so without objection, we'll move forward with this agenda, and that takes us to the approval of the minutes from last year, December 8th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Vento.
And a second?
Second. This is Fredson.
Thank you. Roll call.
Thank you. Fredson?
Aye.
Sterner? Has not joined us yet. Vento?
Aye.
Wolf?
I'll abstain since I wasn't here.
Thank you. Zarin? Has not joined us yet. And Lindstrom?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
And nothing on our consent agenda this afternoon, which takes us to our non-consent business items, which first one is 2020-17. Big project in Excelsior. And of course, whenever we're ripping up the roads to do a sewer project, then we always work with our cities to make sure that we're working in collaboration with them for their street improvements or sidewalk improvements or whatever they have on their mind. And so we need an agreement in place to do that. And that's what we're talking about tonight, I do believe. Mr. Remus, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is correct. Thank you for the introduction. Again, my name is Chris Remus, and I'm an assistant manager in Interceptor Engineering, Wastewater Planning and Capital Delivery. And this afternoon, I'd like to present to you business item 2021-17. Next slide, please. So a little bit of the project background. As introduced, this would be a cooperative agreement with the City of Excelsior. The first part is explaining the MCES scope. We will be removing and abandoning in place the existing L20 lift station, which you can see on the bottom in green, and we'll extend that gravity pipe shown in blue to our existing L19 station in Excelsior. I apologize for a little reference. The kind of highway going at an angle adjacent to L20 is Highway 7, and the main road into Excelsior is Oak Street, for a little bit of reference on where we're at. That section of blue pipe that I referenced will be new gravity pipe that'll extend from the abandoned station of L20 to L19, and that's about 3,600 feet of 18-inch PVC pipe. And along with that, the portion of force main that the lift station is currently pumping into the labeled the 7017-2 pipe, and also labeled in the kind of right center abandoned old force main. That pipe will be abandoned in place up to where it joins the 80285-A pipe and be no longer in service at the end of the project. The portion of the scope that the City of Excelsior wishes to complete, they would like to do street and trail improvements along with water main replacements as part of this project in that same roadway corridor of the blue line. along with us, and the estimated cost is a little over $1 million that the city has, and that will be reimbursed to the Met Council by the city. Next slide, please. So just a summary of the agreement terms that we're looking for the city of Excelsior, that they will provide design data and access to the city-owned properties during the construction phase. The city would also provide inspection on the city-owned facilities that will be constructing. They would assist with any easement acquisition for parcels along the corridor and acquire permits necessary for the city work, which in this case would be the water main. And MCES terms would be that we design the improvements for the construction plan that would be advertised, inspect the MCES owned facilities that are constructed, acquire permits necessary for the Met Council work, and then MCES would invoice the city for the local improvement costs at the end of the project. Next slide, please. So the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorizes its regional administrator to negotiate and execute an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Excelsior for the construction of street and utility improvements as part of the MCES Excelsior Lift Station L20 project. Next slide. And with that, I can be available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Just real quickly, anything in this agreement that's out of the norm with the many agreements that we've had with other cities for similar projects, or is this pretty standard?
Mr. Chair, from what I know of it, it'd represent a pretty standard agreement that we have with other cities.
And Excelsior is on board with this? They're supportive of the plans, I imagine.
Yes, Mr. Chair, they've been talking about this one for a year or two and working through the design elements, and this is kind of the last element to dictate the terms of the agreement.
Any other questions? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm assuming that getting rid of a lift station is going to save us money on maintenance of a lift station because they're expensive to maintain. Is the L19, does that have enough long-term capacity to handle the additional flow? And will there be any savings in electricity from pumps not running as much?
Mr. Chair, yes, on your first statement, council member, that would be correct, that removing the lift station does save in maintenance and operating cost. The design team has looked at the L19 capacity, and it does have sufficient capacity to operate with gravity line now running to it and can continue to convey that flow downstream. With respect to the electrical cost, I couldn't put a number to it. There may be a little bit of operational with increase with the additional flow to it, but I can't really put a number to it at this point.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I wasn't looking for a number. I just was curious, does the pump have to run twice as hard? Or will the one pump be running just maybe a little harder than it was before?
Mr. Remus.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm under the assumption there would be a little bit more duration, but not that extended pump times to the facility being added. You said the pumps are sufficiently sized to handle this additional flow that's coming to it. So yes.
Thank you.
Great question. You mentioned that some of the pipes, I think the term you used was abandoned in place. And is that pretty standard? And I think it is. And I'm just curious about that. Like, does anybody track where all of the abandoned in place pipes are located? Like, would the city know 10 years from now that there's an abandoned sewer line there? 20 years from now, 50 years from now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. To your first question, yes, it would be a standard procedure if we were not excavating in the same corridor that we would abandon in place and put a flowable fill into the pipe to essentially abandon it. To being able to locate that, the facility will still remain in our GIS system as an abandoned facility. So when there are Gopher 1 calls, we would still be able to locate that and mark that facility in any future work that may occur in this area.
And what do we fill it up with?
Like a cementitious flowable fill type material, like a grout.
Cool. Thank you. Other questions, comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to move this forward?
Move approval. This is Wolf.
In a second?
This is Fredson, I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Thank you. Fredson?
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
who has incidentally joined us. Thank
Welcome.
You. Bento?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Zarin? Has not joined us yet. And Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Excellent. And that takes us to our second and last item on our non-consent agenda, which is authorization to hold a public hearing on the draft facility plan for the Blue Lake Wastewater Treatment Plant improvements. And I understand we have a bit of a switcheroo on the date. It was going to be March 1st, and now in order to get the city of Shakopee fully informed, it's going to be March 15th, I do believe. But with that, who's going to be leading the charge here? Is it Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Environment Committee. My name is Jason Peterson. I'm a principal engineer in plant engineering and a project manager at the Blue Lake Wastewater Treatment Plant. And I'm here to present business item 2021-19, authorization to hold a public hearing on the draft facility plan for the Blue Lake Wastewater Treatment Plant improvements. Renee Heflin is here as well and available for questions. The proposed improvements for wastewater solids facilities at the Blue Lake plant are included in the capital program. Last summer, the planning activities were expanded to include evaluation of the liquid treatment facilities as well, in response to a notification by the MPCA to reduce Blue Lake permit limits for effluent phosphorus. The funding improvements for the Blue Lake liquids facilities will be included in future authorization requests. Next slide. The Blue Lake Wastewater Treatment Plant treats wastewater from 29 communities and 300,000 residents in the Southwest metro area. The plant location shown here is in Shakopee, just south of the Minnesota River and west of Highway 169 on Highway 101. The plant effluent is conveyed to the Minnesota River via a 1-mile pipe that goes west from the plant and then turns north between Blue Lake and Valley Fair. Next slide, please. The draft facility plan identifies 3 construction phases. The first phase is a capacity expansion for the solids treatment facilities. These are shown in red. It includes a building expansion and new thickening and dewatering equipment and a second dryer. Once the new dryer is completed, the existing dryer will be rehabilitated so that we have 2 equal trains of similar capacity and lifespan. Also included in phase 1 is $20 million in hydraulic improvements that will allow the plant to process peak flows without adding any additional tanks. This phase is planned for construction in the next 7 to 8 years and is included in the current capital program. The second phase of the project will improve the plant's effluent quality. Blue Lake will be the first MCS wastewater treatment plant designed to achieve effluent total phosphorus of 0.3 milligrams per liter. All other MCS wastewater treatment plants have a permit limit of 1 milligram per liter. The phase 2 improvements shown in yellow include aeration tank modifications and the addition of tertiary filters. The third phase will expand liquid treatment capacity of the Blue Lake plant. The expansion includes 2 new primary clarifiers, 2 new secondary clarifiers, as well as new blowers that are sized to match the increased flows, and an expansion of disinfection and effluent pumping. And these were shown in blue. So, next slide. As Mr. Chair mentioned, we would like to do an update. After reviewing the schedule and the business item and this presentation, we would like to allow for better stakeholder engagement, specifically with the City of Shakopee prior to the public hearing. So we'd like to adjust the schedule for the public hearing to be on March 15th, council adoption to be April 28th, and then submit the facility plan to the MPCA on May 1st of 2021. The construction phase schedule is not affected by this. So the first phase is the solids capacity expansion, as I said, was 7 to 8 years in the future. Phase 2 for the effluent quality improvements is 12 to 15 years in the future. And the third phase, the liquids expansion, is planned for 15 plus years in the future, depending on regional growth rates. So next slide, please. The proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize a public hearing with an amended date of March 15th, 2021 to gather input on the draft facility plan for the Blue Lake Wastewater Treatment Improvements Project, MCS number 809700. So, next slide. I want to thank you for your time, Chair Lindstrom and members of the committee. Renee and I can answer questions now, or you can email us questions later.
Thank you. Any questions? I can't see you all on the screen, so just pipe up if you have a question. There you are.
Mr. Chair, if there's no questions, I'll move approval of the
Please
amended
do.
staff recommendation.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Vento, go ahead.
Councilmember Sterner seconds that one. Roll call, please.
Fredson?
Aye.
Sterner?
Aye.
Vento?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Zarin? And Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And that takes us to our final item, our general manager's report. Lisa.
Happy New Year. Yeah, Happy New Year to you as well. Jason's going to be displaying this is our drafted work plan for you folks this year. I know days like today when we have a light agenda, I'm grateful that we can do this virtually so that you're not spending quite as much time getting to the meeting when it's as short as it is today. But I think you'll see we've got quite a bit of work on tap for this year. And quite a bit actually in the first quarter that we'll be bringing to you. A lot of this activity will be out in the region, so some of your areas that you represent, you can look ahead and anticipate where you might need to be doing some communications or helping us with public hearings for work in your area. I do also want to point out we have listed on here the current plan for info items. If you look at the third column, it'll show you where there's info items being planned. So I think there's 2 for this first quarter so far. But as I've mentioned before, if you've got information items, things that you're interested in that have come up for you and you want to know a little bit more about how that intersects with our business, let us know and we can get an info item together for that. I will let you know that we are planning to come to you in this first quarter to talk about the COVID testing. And there's been a lot going on in that arena in Minnesota and across the country. So I think you'll find that quite interesting.
And when you say COVID testing, you mean the testing of the wastewater itself?
For the influent to see if there's COVID present and if we're seeing different levels based on the occurrence or the incidence of positives in the region. And now I think with this variant, if there's the ability to measure the variant, that could also be another way in which the wastewater influent testing could be helpful. So I think there's a lot of possibilities. I don't know that the research has gone far enough yet for it to be delivering on some of those hopes, but certainly progress is being made. And I think you'll find the results interesting. If you have any questions about the work plan or suggestions, let us know. I think the other thing I thought would be worth touching base on, we've talked about or heard about the concern about rising cases following Thanksgiving and then now past the New Year's and the Christmas holiday. I will say that staff continues to do really a great job of preventing the spread of COVID in the workplace, which is, if you think about all the time they spend in the workplace, that's probably one of their greatest opportunities to become infected with COVID. And everybody's doing a great job of wearing their mask and keeping their distance and not coming to work when they're sick. We emphasize that on a real regular basis, and we're real happy that we have not seen, huge issues with shortages of staff as a result of that. I think the other thing that's important for you to be aware of is the fact that with the vaccination program coming up, we are working to try and get our on-site wastewater staff to be on the 1B list, which right now they're on 1C. And we think that given the implications, if we did run into a large spike of cases at a facility where we had specialty license requirements and not, the bench depth that you would for some parts of our operation, that we would really think it makes sense to reduce that risk by getting those folks vaccinated earlier rather than later. So we're making our case, we're getting support from Mary Bogie and our Council Incident Command, and we're hopeful that we'll hear that our arguments for them to be raised in order of vaccinations will be heard and responded to. That's all I have for today. Glad to be in 2021, that we made it through 2020 in relatively good shape. I mean, it's taken a toll on everybody, certainly. And we do need to make 2021 be a better year. So that's what we're going to focus on.
Absolutely, and I know you're still open to taking suggestions for information items for 2021.
You can just shoot me an email if you think of something, outside of the meeting, but we're always open. Yes.
Great. With that, anything else that anybody else would like to add? If not,